Okay, so now that we have at least talked about our first higher order function, let's look at the next one. And there's really three that we'll look at in this series. But let's start with the next most common one. As a matter of fact, it's kind of funny if you ask Google or chat, what is it? And I think I have it, right? What is the most common? And you could put HOF, but higher order functions in JavaScript. It won't even mention for each. Oh, actually, look at that. It did. It's so funny. I was searching earlier. The most common. This is so funny. It's so interesting how Google results will change based on other things that you find. Right. But actually, the most common is map reduce. This is actually the answer I was looking for. So I'm glad to see they were, because in prior times when I would search for each, I wouldn't find it as the most common order function. And I think because people don't think about it that way. But these are the most common: map, filter, and reduce. So we're going to start with filter because it's really helpful. Because as you can imagine, coming back to our example here, all right, I'm just going to let this run for a minute. Actually, I'm going to take off my breakpoint and let it run here. Do you guys have the most current version of my code? Oh, hold on. No, it doesn't. What's kind of interesting, and this is what we're talking about right now, is that I actually had just an error on a typical syntax error, and it was throwing an error here, right? Because I'm still within the try catch, and I didn't really think about that in the sense that I had forgotten to put error here because it does need that, and it threw an error because I didn't have it. But really, the reason it was throwing an error is I just had a simple syntax error down on display post, and display post is descendant of our on success. So it's still within this try catch, and that is a really good thing to remember. Okay, so the thing I was actually trying to say here is that filter, and I've given you a link here to array filter in MDN, right, is a method on the array instance that creates a shallow copy. Now that's really an interesting point of a portion of a given array. Shallow copy still means that we still have access to the original reference in the array, even when we're filtering, okay? So we'll talk about shallow copies maybe later, but for today we're just going to learn how to write these how to use the filter method. And again, the reason I brought it up here is look at all these posts, right? What if we say I only want to see particular posts that meet my criteria? Well, that would be filter. Like, let's filter out and look at only certain posts. So this is the method we would use to do that. And again, the reason I gave the link was to give you the reference to check it out. But also remember here, when we're calling filter, right, we are in a higher order function because it takes a function as a parameter, right? So it takes that callback function as a parameter to the filter method, which is itself a function. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do, and I've just commented out that console. You don't need that. So actually, let's start writing in here our first, and here's what to think about. Our first filter, maybe you've written one before, but it creates an instance, right? The method instance creates a shallow copy. So what that means is we need to store whatever we have as a result of our filter, which we'll write in a minute, in a variable, because that's then what we can have. It's like filter says, I'm going to look through here. Now here's the list that meets the criteria. Okay. But we're going to write it in a little more longhand form. So I'm going to say const filter post. Right. Now I could say filter post array to be specific, and maybe that is good because that is what it returns. Okay, so then again, looking back here, so then we go, okay, what's the array? So for us, we know it's post dot filter. Okay, so kind of like, right, before when we were writing the for each, Okay, so we reference the array, we reference the method, and now, pretty much like what we've done, but it's going to look a little different. Okay, now in here I still have to say what is each individual post, okay, just like I did on the for each. But in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do return based. Now now the return is going to have an expression that says if it matches my criteria, or in this case my expression, if it's true, then return that result into the array. So a pretty common one we could use here is, because we have access to the individual objects, and if you want to remember, we go down here and we look at, now I've already commented them out, but I could actually set, let's actually set it right here, refresh the page. So if we look at data, right, so within the object itself, within here we have body, ID, title, and user ID. So we could say if user ID making, oh, now remember, post, not post, but post dot user ID. Remembering you got to have the syntax exactly as that, because it's the key that we're looking for. And this is going to say if it's equal. Now this is also one of the things that I noticed in code review sometimes students were having a hard time with, because this is going to be strictly equal. It has to be equal. This has to be equal to whatever is going to be on the other side. This, right, is assigning that variable into whatever the function, right, the function itself. And in this case it is just a regular function, but remember this is assignment. This is strictly equal. So it has to equal what? Right, so come back down here. Well, these are integer values, so we could just say 1. So what this is going to do is it's going to filter through, it's going to look at every one of those posts, referencing each one as a post. Now we could actually even make this even more explicit. Not only are they the user posts, but in this case they're the objects. We could say that. But what it's going to return is a filtered post array. So now we could just say console log, right? Filtered post array. So let's go look at it. First, did it run? All right, let's let it run here. And now I'm going to take off this breakpoint. So now we get just a list, in this case an array, of the post from all those 100 that it looked through each one, and it said if the user ID equals 1, right? Then it returns it. So first, right, in your HOV file, right, what does the filter method, the higher order function, what does it do? It iterates over an array. Based on the criteria, it gives us back a shallow copy, or just a the filtered results of our return condition. Okay, so write that in there, have that in here. Again, what you're doing is basically just trying to say, okay, now, and this is just a very simple one. We could actually say and, right? So here, if we said and, we could make this now a comparison. We could say that it has to meet both our conditions in order for it to be true. So what's another condition? Now I'm going to get an error on here. What's another condition I could look for? Maybe I could say post dot title dot length, right, equal to a certain length. Let's say 6. So what this is going to, and let's actually just run it and look at it. So what does that tell us? That for the user, first user, right, there was no post.title, and let's actually make sure as well. So let's go back. I'm going to get rid of this for a minute, right? And let's go back and look. The title, oh yeah, the titles were quite long, right? Look at that, quite long. That one's pretty short. So let's say, now I'm going to bring it back. And let's say 15. Oh, now it has to be exactly 15. Greater than, right? I mean, equal to is what we're asking here. Is post dot title. Let me make sure I have it right. I'm pretty sure I do. So let's say greater than 10. Now we get some results, right? Do you see that? Right, so that is filter. And you can imagine, based on the amount of things that often we need to do on a web page, this would be really handy. Oh, and let's actually do what it's talking about here, because remember, when you're using an arrow function, if you're only returning, right, a single, if it's only evaluating a single, and in this case, expression, I believe, let's check that out. I believe we can just drop. So prove me right or wrong, right? And we could even drop this. Let's see if I'm right. And I'm right. Okay, so we can write this really short and simple. Okay, so put some notes again in your HOV, and then we'll stop this one and we'll come back around, and now we'll look at the next one. We'll look at the next common one, right, which is map, and we'll kind of come up with maybe some ways we could use map once we understand it.